ask you guys something. If you and your significant other were working with a realtor and you were going to buy a house, and this house was beautiful, looks like a great deal, and then the realtor drops his bombshell on you and tells you, I have had people tell me this house is haunted, or people have died in this house. There have been murders in this house. Would you still buy that house? I definitely would not buy that house. Supernatural, spooky, even telling me you think it's haunted is a deal breaker for me. Also, if people have died in that house murder-wise, also a deal breaker for me. My most recent read was something that I picked up on my book of the month, and it is a debut novel by this author, Lisa M. Matlin, and it's called The Stranger Upstairs. Basically, she asked herself that very question. Would you buy a house where you knew murders had taken place? And apparently, the answer for her is yes. She is a best-selling self-help author and also a therapist, and her name is Sarah Slade. She bought this house, and it's called Blackwood House, and basically intends to renovate it on social media for sponsorships and popularity. However, the house is clearly more than she's bargained for. She swears she can hear footsteps up in the attic, and then she starts thinking that the house is alive. So then, throughout the book, you're asking yourself this question: will her and her husband survive the renovation? From here on out, I'm going to give you guys a review of the book, and I'm warning you now, there will be slight spoilers. I did my very best. I didn't spoil the ending, but there will be pieces of this review that will give you snippets that were revealed slowly throughout the book. So if you don't want any kind of spoiler, please don't watch the rest of this. So this book is classified as a psychological thriller and a supernatural thriller. It's 228 pages, and it was released in this month, September of 2023. And this book does have heavy references of mental illness. There are several characters in this book who are mentally ill, and the author does portray them all very honestly. The mental illness aspect of the book does play in with questioning to, are there supernatural forces here at work? Is the character just having a mental break? We don't know. But the supernatural vibes too are also pretty strong. She makes several comments like the house feels angry, or there's incidents that happen in the house that you can't explain. A plumber gets hit over the head with a pipe, and that's seemingly out of nowhere. Nobody was even around him when it happened. Or when the contractors start ripping up the kitchen, she swears that the house is furious because the house doesn't want anything to be done to it. And she even goes and throws up violently in the kitchen sink because she thinks the house is mad at her because the kitchen is being torn up. And then she also has this creepy bird wallpaper in her room and swears that the birds are alive and watching her. But you're also questioning this as a friend of the past owner, who you never meet, swore she found cameras in the house that she thinks were placed there by the evil next neighbor. And the dude next door is clearly bad. He wants to sell his house. He's just there, trust fund baby, looking to sell the house and make a quick buck, and his house is clearly worth a lot. But he can't sell it because Blackwood House is right next door, and nobody wants to touch this murder house. So he can't sell his until somebody bulldozes Blackwood House. And he's constantly going to the town meetings, trying to get somebody to bulldoze the house, and it's just not happening. So every time somebody buys a house, I do think he plays a big part in trying to drive them out in order to get his way. And he's clearly a very bad guy. But the plot does flip between three themes. The bad neighbor next door is definitely a heavy part of the plot. You start asking yourself, well, is somebody trying to drive her out of this house? And then you're also asking yourself, okay, is the house possessed by supernatural forces and is it actually alive? And then you start asking yourself, is she suffering from her mental illness and just having a mental break? The initial focus on the book really sets the tone for the house feeling like a murder house. The author tries to personify the house as the story continues on, though, making you really question whether or not it's actually alive. And there's also a subplot that continuously asks the question, who is Sarah Slade? What is she all about? Where has she come from? I did think these three plot themes, I'll call them, did add decent suspense to this book. She does a good job on building tension. Often you're asking yourself, why won't the neighbors just tell her going on? They clearly know all of the history because this street is very wealthy and rich and generational. So these people have been here for a really long time and they know everything that's going on, but nobody will talk to her and tell her. And then you're also asking yourself, the evil neighbor next door, is he behind all of this? Is she just imagining all of it? Is the house really alive? And there were definitely parts in this book I was actually scared for her safety. I was convinced the guy next door was breaking into her house and that he was really, really dangerous. And then there were parts of the book too where it made me really believe that the house was possessed and that the only thing that was going on were supernatural forces at work and everything else was just, her imagination, that the neighbors were breaking in and questioning her safety. As far as the characters go, Sarah Slade is the main character and she's not likable. I'm just going to start off by saying that right away. Throughout the book, the author gives you pieces of explaining where she's come from, what her family's like, what her relationships with her parents and her sister were like, what she was like as a child, when she went to see a therapist as a child, and her character slowly devolves over time. But at no point throughout this book does any of that backstory make you like the character. It actually makes her worse. Her character just devolves more and more and more. It is almost, in my opinion, impossible to get invested in her as a character. I disliked her the entire book, but there were moments of sympathy when you find out more of her backstory. But she's basically messy, unreliable, she can't express any emotions, and she's heavily reliant on pills and booze. She's definitely an alcoholic, and they don't really say it outright, but I think she probably also abuses prescription medication too. The other, I'll call it main character. I don't really think he's maybe a main character. He's more maybe a minor character, but Joe, her husband, this dude is just a despicable character all around too. He's lazy, childish, not loyal. And when you get more of her backstory with her family, you find out more about him, and it just makes you like him even less. He is not a likable character at all. I just felt nothing for him. The only character I kind of liked was Emma, who is her friend and coworker, who's also a therapist, who tries to help Sarah on numerous occasions, and I felt like she was the only one who tried to help her. And ironically, Emma lives on this ritzy, expensive street too, and has history about what's going on in this house and why the people won't say anything. I was actually a little disappointed in her character because she's probably the most likable one, and I didn't think she told Sarah enough about what was going on. But all in all, I think she was the best character in the book. As for the writing style of this book, the author balances between past and present. So she gives us snippets of the present time by reading about news articles and, little snippets of the news on TV. And these are clearly the present time, as there's a spoiler where the news reveals there's bodies found in the house, and you think, oh, what? But everybody's alive. So it becomes clear that we're reading the story through Sarah's perspective that's in the past. And then all of the news snippets are clearly what is going on in the present. Oh, that was a nice touch, actually. It adds more suspense to the plot as she's foreshadowing what is to come with the news snippets, and then she's jumping back to the main story. I could see how that might annoy some people because it might feel like she's dropping, plot bombs without letting it progress naturally. But I thought it was a nice break in the tension, and it actually kind of ramped up the suspense when you knew something really bad was going to happen, but you had to read all of the detail behind it to get to that point. I didn't think that the jumping between past and present affected the pacing at all either. It's a nice break from the current story. I found it enjoyable to know basically X event is going to happen and then read the fine details from the main character's perspective to see what really went down. She added a lot of context in there that really, obviously the news doesn't know. The news doesn't know what really happened, but when you're reading through the book, you see, okay, this is what really happened. Who was involved? What drove her to this point? What were the next steps? Those things are all something that she adds in from the point of view story from Sarah. And it also really makes you question if you really know the truth behind what's going on. Because obviously what you read and see in the media is surface deep. There were a couple themes and symbols throughout this book too, and definitely borrowed on past stories. There was an Amityville horror vibe with this house. It really seemed that Sarah, the longer she was in the house, the more her mental health deteriorated. And it was just like George Lutz from the Lutz family. I did feel like been here, done that. It was weak. Amityville did that better. But it was there. And I definitely, as I was reading the book, it made me think about that on numerous occasions. There's also this urban legend of the babysitter and the, intruder in the attic. It's actually originally from the 1960s. And that's where, the babysitter is getting calls in the house from somebody spooky, and you find out he's been in the house the whole time. I felt that due to the footsteps in the attic, we start to question if there's actually someone physically up in the attic. Has somebody broken into the house? And then you start asking yourself, are there supernatural forces at work here? Are there ghosts pacing around upstairs? I initially found myself thinking about the babysitter urban legend, where, like I said, the guy was in the house the whole time. I thought the two themes of this, like the urban legend, the Amityville horror, did make some pieces of the book feel predictable. I've seen this before, been there, done that feeling. I thought there could be more creativity there. But let me give you guys my personal opinions now on what did I like or not like about this book. Sarah Slade is a mild version of Joe Goldberg. Everybody's seen you or you've read the books and you know all about him. Her snarky commentary is Joe Goldberg. She's just a watered down version of Joe Goldberg. As the reader, we were in her head too much too, and it made her so much more unlikable. She's just a jerk all around. I know she's suffering from mental illness, but you could not root for her as a character at all. It was impossible. Her cat, Reaper, was the best character in the book, and I think that really says something here. Yes, I clearly am a cat lover in real life. I am. But I didn't like any of the human characters at all. They all sucked. It was such a shame. The gothic house vibe, though, very good. 10 out of 10. It did feel a little repetitive, maybe, but I don't knock off for that because I think the descriptions of the house and the spooky forest surrounding it were actually really great. The only thing I was disappointed about is the house name, Blackwood House. Been there, done that. There's a book called The Haunting of Blackwood Manor that was written by Darcy Coates, and this book was written a while ago. I want to see authors name their spooky house something else other than Blackwood House. Come on. Let's come up with something new and creative and inventive. You can do it. Even though the book didn't have any likable characters and the house name was pretty lame, when the book was done, I kept thinking about it for days on end. And that's one of my benchmarks for a really good book. I didn't like the main character, but I had questions. The author threw in plenty of, I guess, red herrings and twists and turns that really kept you from guessing the real truth in the end. And when the book was over, I still wasn't sure what happened. I have my theories, but she leaves it open for interpretation. And normally I hate that. It's really an Inception vibe. But in this case, I thought it was pretty good, actually. I could go in any direction, and I liked that. I was disappointed, however, that there were not more spooky supernatural happenings in this book. I personally am more of a fan of the supernatural thrillers than just a psychological thriller, and this book turned into strictly a psychological thriller after about 60% of the book. If you're not into that, be warned, it does shift the tone heavily. As for my recommendation for this book, 3 hearts. Pretty solid, not super great. I would recommend this book for you if you're a fan of psychological thrillers. I would not recommend this book if you are a fan of supernatural thrillers. While the theme is there, the ending leaves the question of whether or not the house is really haunted, which I liked. It wasn't heavy enough throughout the book for you to say that it's a supernatural thriller. If you like murder house stories, this book is definitely for you. I would not recommend it if you're looking for a book with reread value. Once you read it, you're going to know all the secrets of the plot and nothing's going to be a surprise anymore. So take all that with a grain of salt and decide for yourself. Are you going to read this book or not? Let me know. I want to hear, if you guys have read it, what you think about it. This is a new release this month. It's out. Read it. Let me know what you think. I think it's a solid addition to the thriller category, but definitely not my favorite this year. But you guys might feel different. The suspense was good enough that I would recommend it for just the thriller aspect alone if you're into that. But if you're looking for a niche portion of the thriller, maybe evaluate based on my suggestions. But let me know. Let's talk about it. Until next time,